Hey everybody, welcome to the Marquez Says Show. I'm your host, Marquez Mosier, and this is my co-host, cohort, and eldest son, Austin Jordan. He and I always seem to bring out the feisty side of each other, and it leads to some very spirited conversations. There's never really any one topic. We see the world from many different perspectives, and sometimes we agree, and sometimes we don't. Either way, it gets very interesting, so sit back, relax, and have a bit of fun at our expense as we explore some of the most unexpected perspectives you'll ever hear about the world we live in. So, let's get started.
I'm just literally sitting on classics. Like that song I played you, that unreleased one that I just did.
Welcome to the Marquez Says Show. This is Marquez. That's my cohort rambling.
I'm just so talented.
Oh wow, this is how we're gonna start this one.
Do you know why I'm so talented?
Yeah, because you're my son.
True, but there's another reason. Because I committed.
Okay, he's already alluding to what we're going to be discussing today, which is if you listen to the last episode about motivational quotes, we started it off and there was one that said, decide, commit, succeed.
And that just really spoke to me.
And it set him off. We had to move on, but we decided we're going to do a follow-up with it. And we're actually going to wrap it up into different things about how, it's not that simple. It's not decide, commit, succeed. So, there's steps. And in anything that we do, that there's steps that we have to take in order to be successful, to get where we want to be. And
you're shattering my whole worldview right now.
I know. I am sorry. It's
okay.
But starting with that one, that was why we were laughing, and we actually mentioned it off air to some people, and it's just the simplicity of that is ridiculous. And while some people, it falls in line with a lot of the people that believe in, hey, half the battle is showing up. Really? Well, if half the battle is showing up, then that certainly isn't that big of a challenge, because you succeeded halfway by just showing up.
I can do an extra 10% to get a passing grade. Like, I can make that work.
Yeah, talking about 60%, 70%. Yeah, and that's kind of part of the problem. That's exactly part of the problem, is that what I was talking about last time is that we've lowered our standards. And maybe it's because people actually don't understand that there is more steps to success. Are we lowering our standards so much and giving the impression that it's just all in your mind? And don't get me wrong, I am a big believer in perspective and mindset, and you have to have that. I mean, it's essential.
What's the name of your overall group again?
Yeah, Vision Perspective Group. So, but it's just that you cannot count on that at all. My coaching philosophy is based off of think more, care more, live more, which is essentially awareness, kindness, and action. Because without the action, nothing's going to happen. I mean, it's great to want it, to wish it, but that's. You see, if you can see us, he's got this grin, like he's just like this.
My coaching philosophy is all commitment.
Yeah, that's just. So, okay, so let's just jump right in then. So, I mean, depending on, you have essentially two types of jobs. You have kind of a retail sales management. I mean, you actually have some management responsibilities, and then you also have your music.
Right.
So, with your job, in order to be successful, you just have to show up, right? You just have to decide that you're going to show up.
Look, I just have to decide that I'm showing up. That's it. That's all there is to it. I wake up in the morning, right, as everybody does, I hope. And
if they don't know it.
That's true.
Well, they could.
Well, we don't know.
Hey, they could wake up in the afternoon.
That's true. It's morning somewhere. I decide that I'm gonna get ready and go to work.
Okay.
I commit to that by getting ready and going to work. Right. And then I get to work. And that's
success.
That's like, yeah, that's the success. That's the whole. That's like the journey right there. And I just feel so fulfilled.
I do believe your manager will probably disagree that you have now had success just because you showed up.
But you see, I committed. Mm-hmm. I just did it. I followed through on my dreams. And nobody could take that from me.
Oh, the sarcasm is just dripping. But that's part of the problem. So when you do get to work, though, I mean, that's what spurred this conversation. But we really want to talk about, like, what does it take? As far as the sales part, let's just break it down into that part. For the sales part, what do you find are the steps that are necessary? Like, from when you actually on your way, because I remember. Okay, I'll start, because I remember a little bit with my sales days back in the day. I would literally, I mean, I was a professional salesperson, so I had to take it kind of seriously.
Yeah.
So driving to work, literally, it was, okay, get me in the right frame of mind, put on the right music, you know, put that perspective. And I had a great manager tell me that when you get to the door, take all your problems, whatever's going on at home, whatever, put it in a bag, set it outside that door. It'll be there when you get back.
Yeah, what book is that from? Because that's what everybody says.
I believe it's... I don't know where it is or who said it. I'm sorry, I can't give it attribution, but...
Well, I want to say that... Can we come up with something new for that? Because I hear that. That was like the thing I heard on my first day starting at retail.
Well, some things actually are true. Like in the case, I mean, it's obviously meant to be that you have to be the right frame of mind. Grandpa and my dad, your grandpa, my dad, used to always talk about having your mind right. That it wasn't... And he wasn't the first person to say that, but he emphasized to me more about if you don't have your mind right, then you could do more harm than good. Yeah, and that was something that got translated, and that's part of the brown bag thing, is that just leave it outside so that when you get into work, you can concentrate on what you're doing. I had a list at one point of it for inventory, and I went and I walked the lot, I checked the inventory, made sure I knew what the cars were, what any specials were. This was at a Lexus dealership, so kind of a success went a long way, and a mistake could hurt. Right. So I would walk the lot. I'd make sure the inventory. I'd see what new cars were there, what new used cars were there, which ones went on sale, so that I had all of that information at the tip of my tongue when someone was talking.
Right.
And these are the steps of like preparation that you needed. Because a lot of it, I'll get to this one later on, but that was like the first step. And then of course it was making sure that when we were at the point we called colors, that was how we would get our
I remember
customers.
Colors, yeah.
And that was basically staying sharp because people would try to distract you.
Right.
They would try to distract you, and then they would call it. And when the car came in, they would have them. So there is a whole host of steps that you have to take, and that was all before I even got to talk to somebody.
Right. So it's similar. That's like my same approach. Is like I'll go into work. You got to know it is there on your floor, because if you don't know it's there, you can't sell it. Or at least it strongly diminishes your chances.
Absolutely.
So product knowledge is key. Product knowledge is super essential. And then knowing how to then use that product knowledge into slipping it into a conversation naturally and stuff like that.
We'll get to that one later.
Right. Yeah, that'll be later. But yeah, as far like.
But how do you get in the frame of mind? What do you on your ride there? Do you get music, or is it? I mean, like some people. Yeah. Starbucks. I know you like your coffee. A lot of people do that.
Coffee. So if I have coffee at home, I just keep forgetting to pick it up. When I go to the store. But when I have coffee at home, I brew it and I'll like bring the coffee with me in like a thermos or whatever.
Right. But is that what helps you? Is that what helps you kind of like?
Yeah.
It starts to keep you centered, so to speak.
Yeah. So having the coffee is like, is a big deal because it's like a habit and a routine. So if you deviate from that, you start to get all out of whack.
Yep.
And I'll generally probably end up at a Starbucks anyway because I want to get the egg bites for breakfast. So
they're pretty good.
They're pretty good, yeah. So I mean, you've got all that going. You got to keep. I like to keep things consistent. Like you've pointed out, as I'm becoming more and more OCD. So like, when I break from certain things that I'm used to doing, it kind of spins me out a little bit. So
we do say OCD obviously in the lightest, gentlest form because that's obviously something serious. So I don't want anybody to think we're making light of it because we're not. But for lack of a better term, it was just that way so most people can understand that rigid strictness of adherence. So.
Right. But yeah, so essentially just kind of in those routines or whatever. And that's kind of my biggest thing is I can listen to music or maybe listen to a podcast or anything like that. That can kind of deviate. But like my big things is just keeping the same timeline and stuff like that is like my biggest kind of one. And
actually,
sequencing of events.
Interesting you say sequencing of events because that one was not for me as important. It was kind of, I mean, I need to get stuff done, but if I got into the office and I decided to catch up on my follow-ups first versus going to get to checking the inventory versus checking on, today's sales and stuff, that all of those things, it didn't matter as much as what the sequence that I did them in, as much as I just had to get them done before, say, my actual start. I mean, I'd get there early in order to do this so that I could start and not do it part of that time when I should be looking for customers. So
right, yeah. And then the prep is, I mean, you want to talk about like the whole percentage of a battle? The prep is like a huge percentage of that battle too, because. And the difference between prep is it's not like saying, oh, well, showing up is half of the battle. No, prep is conscious decisions that you have to make, and you have to basically educate yourself to put yourself in a position to actually follow through on what your end game is.
And a lot of people will think that just showing up, that they will overvaluate their skills, and they'll think that they can wing it. And some people can, depending on the situation, because they're gifted. But that's not the norm, and it should not be. And imagine how much better those people would be if they actually applied a little bit of preparation and such, as opposed to. And when we say products, we both of us are talking about physical products, but it can obviously be if you are in a like a call center, or you're going in, you need to know what your scripts are. You need to know what, has there been any changes? Has there been any, So that product is basically preparation. Whatever you do, whatever your job is, whether it's picking up garbage, is there different sequence?
Well, even
it doesn't.
And even school too. It's like you could wing an essay. You could totally wing an essay.
Yeah.
And it might be great. It might get you an A, but you might also not.
It might also be more just luck that you got that too.
Right. Exactly. But you could get so much more out of that experience.
Absolutely.
Had you actually read the stuff. And I mean, I'm kind of a hypocrite talking about that because I'll wing a lot of my stuff, but like.
Well, and see, that brings up a good point about that preparation. At some point, you do have to realize, I am prepared. I do. Now, there's that nagging feeling on a lot of people have that, like, well, I'm not prepared enough. I'm not prepared enough. I need to do more. I need to do more. But that there is actually a point at which you probably know as much as you're going to know for that test or for that day's shift.
Yeah.
Or whatever the case may be. And while you may learn a little bit more, how much incrementally better you're going to be is not probably worth the energy you're going to expend.
That's definitely true. And at some point, the experience itself is like the best teacher that you could have. Like, you could be prepared for something, but you're not going to necessarily going through that experience will prepare you even better for the next experience. I mean, obviously the actual act isn't necessarily preparation, but it does prepare you for something else in the future.
Yeah, it's not part of the preparation, but it becomes preparation just in line with everything else.
And it'll become part of your Rolodex of knowledge and stuff in the back of your mind and all that. So
yeah, that's actually so true. What about does it change much with music? If you have to sit down and when you're doing, like, if you're going to create a song or any project, if you have to mix a project,
preparation is significant. All right, it really depends.
Don't be too technical.
Well, you kind of got to be a little bit. So it depends on what avenue of music. Like, as a producer, is there a lot of preparation for me? Not really, because I'll go in and just kind of do something and start building from the ground up, almost like a jam session, even if it's just me.
Right.
Like, I'll experiment with stuff, or like if there's other people or whatever. Producing and writing, not so much on the preparation. Because that can kind of happen whenever. I know certain people have rituals that they can't write unless they do this, or they can't produce unless they do this and stuff, and that's totally valid, and like I could understand that, but I've never really found that to be like my case. But as far as recording goes, yeah, there is preparation. You have to make sure that your levels are good. You have to make sure that everything is plugged in correctly. You got to make sure all your connections are made. And some of this stuff is easier than others, because if you're only recording like one thing, then you only have one connection. Well, I mean, maybe multiple connections, but with one constant stream.
Yeah.
But if you're recording like a full band at one time, and you're getting the drums and you're getting the guitars and you're getting the bass and you're getting the vocal, all this stuff at the same time, you have to be prepared for that, because you can't just walk in there and wing that. You can maybe wing the session itself, the recording, but you have to, I mean, a drum set is going to have most likely a minimum of 3 mics, and that's if you're really like DIYing it.
Right.
And then you got 2 mics on a guitar, then you got the DIs on the guitar, then you got bass mics, and then it adds up, and you have to be prepared for that, because your band walks in, they're not going to set that up for you.
Now, do you do that? Would you do that? Because I know, like, for a lot of cases when I have conversations, calls, discovery calls, and things like that, I'll have conversations where I know I'm just winging it, basically, because it's a get to know you kind of call, whether it's other vendors or potential clients, and I know that I'm kind of winging it. That was kind of like you're producing it, because I don't really know what I'm going to have, so therefore the preparation is essentially just my own. Hey, this is my philosophy, this is how it applies, and this is how I can apply it for you.
Yeah.
And then, but you're right, on other cases when I know that there's a particular issue, or when I do kind of my other project stuff that's not coaching or consulting based, it's like operations, management, administration. That stuff is much more rigid. Like you said, I know that I have to make sure that I have to speak to, what about project management? What are we going to do? How are we going to organize it? What are the time frames? What are the resources that are going to be needed?
Right.
The same thing that you talked about. Now, I am not the best at necessarily writing that stuff down as much as I keep it in my head.
Right.
I'm much better now, though, mainly just because I've realized how much easier it is. So I do have that. Do you write it down? How do you approach it? I mean, like, if you know that you've got a drum, a bass, a guitar, lead singer, and possibly keyboard.
Yeah, I do write it down. So, like, well, it's because you kind of... It makes things so much easier.
Of course.
It's like, and you kind of, I mean, I guess you don't have to, but you really should, because when you're dealing with the way I like to mic a drum set, I'm using probably like 7 mics on a drum kit. So it's like, which one is your kick? Which one is your snare? Which one is your hi-hat? Which one is your overhead? Which one? I mean, there's just so much. So you write it down, and like you kind of got to.
Okay, business tip.
Yeah.
For you know what an SOP is? Standard operating procedure.
Oh, okay.
Right, when you write those down, you should actually start putting them in order, so that if you like you just said, with this certain drum kit or these things, you put down everything you need. That way, you don't necessarily have to re-do it every time. You can literally
you just have it.
I have it. And that's a huge strength that if you have that standard operating procedure, especially if you get to the point where, what if you need to have an assistant or something and say, hey, go check on that, or if there's a fire, not a real fire, but
fire,
and you got to go check on another piece of instrument, and the guy says, hey, I'll do that. Go, and you can be like, okay, here it is. This is what I need you to do.
Right. Yeah.
So for the future.
That's true. That's a good one. I'll have to write that down. Put it on Google Drive.
Yeah, that way you have that. Those are big deals when you're talking about preparation.
Yeah.
And
exactly. Like, and a good thing that I do have is kind of like what you're saying is I have like a microphone list. Certain microphones that I like to default to for certain situations. Yeah. Exactly, like an E609 for a guitar, stuff like that. Like or an electric guitar, I should say. But yeah.
So that I see that's the preparation. So hopefully that part of it is that you realize that when someone says decide, yes, that is the first step. There's actually tons of things that go in before you decide. That's a lot about where your perspective, your mindset, what exactly is that decision. There's a ton of things that go into that as well. Mm-hmm. But okay, so if you decide, and then there's so many steps when you say commit. Well, what exactly does commit mean? And part of that is what we just talked about with preparation. That's a huge part of it, is that, sure, you said you're going to commit to do it, but what does that mean? You have to take the actionable steps and the preparation for whatever you're going to do, looking at standard operating procedures, the way best practices and things of that sort.
Right.
Those are what you need to do in order to be able to fully commit, because otherwise you're not. If you're not taking the steps to get your mind right, focus, create your routines, do all of those things, you're not actually committing.
That's true.
You're just saying.
Well, you're saying you're committing.
Talking.
Well, and to be fair, that's what most people do, and that's probably as most people will ever go in a lot of certain situations and stuff that they say that they really want to do. And I mean, I can kind of relate to it. There's stuff that I say I'm going to do, and I'm not really doing it. Like, so it's hard. But that's the whole point. Is this oversimplification?
Right.
It makes things seem like it's not going to be hard.
Yeah.
And we need to be encouraging the fact that it is hard, but that's why it's so rewarding. So just keep doing it and keep pushing through it. Don't expect it to be easy. Don't even desire it for it to be easy. Like, that doesn't even make any sense. It's going to be hard.
Well, and what'll happen is that hard changes. It becomes different, where that difficulty for somebody who's newer or is getting started doing something, then all of a sudden, the next time they do it, or 5 times down the road, or a couple months if you're in a job, that kind of thing, that part is no longer difficult.
Right.
But you're learning now to the next level.
Right.
The next
and
steps.
you just keep leveling up. And I know that first level up from 0 to 1 is hard, and it's scary. But it pays off, and it gets easier. And my best experiences, especially in the music world, were the times where I felt like a total idiot. Like, just completely, like, it's probably not very healthy, but, like, when I was like, oh, wow, that was, like, super stupid. Like, what I just did.
We've all had those moments.
Like, and it's embarrassing, because oftentimes, especially in the music world, you do it in front of somebody.
Yeah.
And so, true. Like, it's like, the stakes aren't necessarily high, but the pressure is high. It could be. Yeah, depending on the situation, but the pressure is there. And so you're going to be so much harder on yourself in those types of situations. And I mean, not that you shouldn't be. You kind of should be. It helps you learn.
Well, that brings us.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say that brings us kind of to the next point about with the action, like
right.
when you're actually doing something. So if before the decision and how to come to that decision, that's something that you can talk to us. Well, did you separate, or you could talk to us for something else, because that's what Vision Perspective Group is about. That's what creating perspective, creating mindset, figuring out what exactly the direction you want to go. That's a separate thing, and that's, if you want to get a hold of us, feel free, and we can talk about that. But after that, we're talking about how the preparation for after you decided and part of the commitment, and then when you're actually doing stuff, what are you taking from it? Because some people will just mail it in. Right. They don't. They just going through the motions, and then they're wondering why nothing changes. And what, like you talked about, what with the music, or let's go back to the sales part of it, or the even management part of it. For me, when I look at how I manage my job, when I've been asked what's your style, and I essentially boil it down to, my job as the leader / manager is to take away all of the distractions or any of the obstacles that those who are underneath me have, so that they can do the job that they were hired to do. Yeah. And it sounds simple, but you don't realize that sometimes it can be a ton. There can be a lot of things that other management, or the previous way that the process was set up so that those people had to do all sorts of things that weren't directly related to getting their job done. Right. And that's usually the inefficiency that happens. That's usually the lack of optimization, which is what I really enjoy, because I have to see things from a different perspective. That's why I like operations and management and administration, because it's in all of that different stuff. So we have to take into account when we're actually doing something, our actions, that we're learning and that we're taking something from it and moving on to those next steps. And if you can do that along with communication, like for me, and I've told you guys this, actually this is how I kind of was part of the way we raised you, was tell you why. Not even if you were 4, 5, 6 years old, age appropriate. And of course this could be skill appropriate when you get into being adults, but explain, hey, I need you to do XYZ. This is why. Right. Now, you may or may not agree with me still, and you may not like it, but it will not be me saying, because I said so. Right. Because that's the worst. Because nobody wants to hear that. No, they don't. And especially in a high, intensity situation, if somebody tells you, I told you so, you are not going to take anything from... So. Right. Yeah. You're not going to take anything from that conversation other than anger, resentment, frustration. Defense mechanisms. Right. So, but if somebody can explain to you why it is, you might hate that reason. You might think the reason's stupid, and it might be, but you can better counter it, and it helps you figure out, okay, well, this is what this person likes, especially in a workplace dynamic. This is what this person likes. How do I do that and still, not necessarily just become a robot? Well, and that brings up two things that you brought up. So when you actually are interacting and you're actually making action, whether or not you're the subordinate or whether you're the manager, right, is that you have a choice, or you have an ability to, if you understand kind of the concept of why, at least at a very top high level, then you may realize, if once you've done it, that there's a better way. Right. But which you wouldn't have known had the person just said, because I want you to do it that way, or because I told you so, or that's, and you can either correct it, or it actually works out the way it should. And you realize, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't think of it from that way. And now you've just learned something. You've actually just added to your repertoire of what we talked about, preparation. So for the next time, you won't even necessarily question it. And you might even be the one saying, hey, this worked. So-and-so showed me this, and this worked. And then they're going to use it. And so it's almost a win-win. But it wouldn't have been had the person not communicated clearly. Right, yeah. It's and the other thing that when you mentioned about people is knowing what their hot spots are. Basically understanding that sometimes when you're talking to someone, or when you're communicating, when you're actually trying to do something, knowing how they're going to react. Like in sales, a lot of people call them pressure points or pain points. I don't like pain points. I like pressure points, or because it's a little bit different. It's going to be... It doesn't sound as bad. Yeah. It's like, what are you trying to get them to do? Right. But also when you're communicating, when you're actually at work, is how does this person like to be recognized? Do they like public recognition? Yeah. What exactly? Go ahead.
What are their receptions like? How do they receive information and like praise or or not even necessarily praise, but criticism, constructive criticism?
Right. Do they like to be set aside? Like if it's
do they want it to be given to them straight, or do they want the sandwich method of something good, then the bad in the middle, and then the
I love good news, bad news. Good news, bad news. Yeah, I love that approach of good news, bad news.
I flip flop. I like
good news first, bad news second.
Sometimes I just want to be told directly. Most of the time I want to be told directly what it is, because I can see the tiptoeing and I hate that.
Yeah.
It irritates me. Plus, especially if somebody's going to be like, oh, well, you did this really good, but I didn't like this. It feels like the first thing was fake as like an avenue to get to the bad thing. Yep. So I don't really want to hear that. That just irritates me.
But see, that's because it's all in the presentation. If you give someone a compliment, and you have to leave the compliment out there, like, hey, I really enjoyed how you did that to XYZ. And you know what? And don't use but.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, because I
learned that one a long time ago.
Because but's a contradiction and it's a negatory, and it's like basically despite despite what was before instead of an in spite. And
that one I learned from somebody who, I don't remember where that came from, but yeah, when you use and they go and I also think that you could really be successful if maybe you incorporated a little bit of XYZ in it. Now, that was a true compliment. And then also, hey, I'm looking out for you. Mm-hmm. And you know, I mean, this is somewhat of a simplification, which is ironic given that we were talking about, you know, how we don't want to simplify.
Yeah, but there's a difference between this kind of simplification and a word.
That's true. But
this isn't. See, the thing about the other thing was that it was easy, right? True. It was like easy. It was too simplified. All you gotta do is
decide, commit, and you'll have success.
Exactly. This is not what we're talking about. It might be necessarily simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
And I
say that about success. Success is simple. It may not be easy.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you do the things that you need to do.
Right. And there is a difference. There's a Ronald Reagan speech where he talks about that.
Is it?
Yes. It's the only reason I know it is because it's on the Jay Electronica album. But there's a speech where he does that.
He was called the Great Communicator. So
yeah.
But yeah, that takes that part of action that you have to actually do something, and it's not just this brings up another part. Just doing something isn't enough. It has to be productive. It's productivity versus activity. You need to make sure that when you are doing things that you aren't just going by the numbers. And I mean, and if that's your job and it gets you through your 8 hours, okay, so be it. That's great. But even then, you should probably try to figure out something that you can get from it. Otherwise, you're going to go insane.
Yeah.
You're going to be crazy. You're going to go home and you're going to kick your dog and it's all horrible, you know? That's the old adage.
Oh, shit. I've never heard that one.
That's an old adage about when someone's
that wouldn't fly in today's day and age.
Should never fly, period. But
yeah, but I mean, you don't...
That's the old...
We saw how popular John Wick got.
Yeah. But that's the old adage that, you know, go home and kick your dog, and it's just... It's way back when it was go home, beat your wife, kick your dog. And I mean, it's gotten better. So that was when, quote unquote, you know, the wife it didn't matter. It was like, anyway, that's for another time, another episode. But yeah, so if you actually need to be productive. You need to be learning something from it. You need to be taking something from it, even if it's just the smallest little nugget. Because that will be able to build on so that you can get to the next level, next day, next shift, whatever the case is. So, again, going back to that saying about decide, commit, succeed. Well, that commit part, there's a whole bunch that goes into it.
Right. Well, the commitment... It's like, and the thing that I really hate about these statements is that they're set up to be like, oh, well, you don't think you have to commit? Like, if you disagree with that part.
Right.
It's like, no, that's not at all what we're saying, except for the fact that there's so much more to it than just saying commit. Like, you have, like what we just talked about, we just spent like 20 minutes talking about all the stuff that you have to do, and that's largely before you even get to doing the actual task.
Yeah.
Like, there's just so much more than just the simple word of commit.
And it's hard. It's almost like I see it in my head where it's like a scribble, where it's like, okay, decide, and that's actually crossed out with a whole bunch of things before it, like mindset, perspective, viewpoint, possible repercussions, all these other things, and then you've got commit. It's like, no, cross that out, but preparation, you know, instigation, productivity versus activity, learning, you know, all these other things, and
you know what that saying is good for? It's good for creating a
conversation.
It's good for creating a 3-act narrative, right? Because you can frame things in that, like, you make it like a graph, and you
Right.
go, okay, so all my stuff in the prepare column,
Yeah.
or the decide column,
Yep.
all my stuff in the commit column, and then all my stuff in the succeed column. But then people do that, and they go, whoa, that's a lot. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff
I mean,
there.
'cause
Oh, go ahead.
For the commit part, we didn't even really. I mean, there's a lot in that we talked about as far as the preparation, the action while you're learning,
Well,
doing
you have
something
to
through
turn
it.
what you prepared for into something like what you said. I liked the word is actionable. You have to turn all that preparation and knowledge and all that stuff into something that actually helps
Otherwise
with
it's
what you're trying.
wasted.
Yeah, otherwise you know a lot of stuff. And okay, cool, you know it, but you have to figure out how to then use that to your advantage to get to where you want to be, and that is like a lot of the commit part.
I've heard that the saying that knowledge is power, and then people will say, no, knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. Now, I'm not totally sure I agree with that in all its sense, but I understand the point of it.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power. Yes, actually, knowledge is power because it'll drive your decisions. It can drive,
Right.
your perspectives, how you treat people and stuff. But I guess, applied knowledge is power. That makes sense too, because unless you actually apply what you know, it doesn't do you much good. So
Right.
I think they're one and the same. Sometimes I do think that while I rail against these oversimplified sayings, some of them do have an inherent, like the implicity of what you're supposed to do. Like knowledge is power.
Right.
That one kind of to me has that implication that, well, duh, if you don't use it, it's obviously not going to help you. Where decide,
Well,
commit, and succeed
but-
is a little bit different because those ones, if you decide, there is no implicit like, well, what do you mean decide? What, there isn't.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. You can have a lot of knowledge, and you might have the power with that knowledge. It doesn't mean you have to exercise that power, though. The power doesn't go away if you're not using it.
Ah, I see your angle on that one.
So it still exists. You still have it. You just might not be exercising
So
it.
is it really, so when they say like knowledge is power, applied knowledge is power, it's actually knowledge is power, action is power.
Yeah, and how you
Or
apply
knowledgeable
it, how
action,
you
yeah.
apply it is a vessel for that power. It's like a socket almost.
Yeah, it goes both ways. It'll work both ways. So.
Right. It's like just because we don't have something plugged into that socket doesn't mean that if we were to plug something into it, we wouldn't get
Yeah,
power.
there's still power running through it.
Right.
So, yeah.
Exactly. So I don't necessarily. I mean, it really depends on what you're trying to do with that knowledge.
Well, and that brings us this wraps it up. You talked about this third, where you had decide, commit, success. Now, what determination is success? I mean, that's obviously different for everyone. Now, in the workplace, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but in the workplace, it's not. Though.
Yeah, you can be
there
quantifiable.
are certain goals and stuff that they give you.
That's true.
However, there's always little caveats for these goals, right? Like, let's say you make your sales goal. Okay, well, let's say you had a subpar conversion or a subpar UPT or whatever. Conversion is how many transactions you make versus the amount of people that come in, for those who don't know. And UPT
Closing ratio.
Essentially, yeah. And
For other industries.
Exactly, yeah. And then UPT is units per transaction. It's just little metrics and stuff, right?
Right.
So let's say you met your sales goal and you send that out, and like it's like, oh cool, you made your sales goal. Okay, but I noticed your UPT was a little low. So then it's like the goalposts get changed a little bit.
Right.
And it's not to say that that's necessarily bad.
Well, I'll just interject real quick because that
Yeah.
one, the pay scale that we had when I was talking about Lexus and stuff, was essentially because there were pretty big margins and such, and you had to know a lot because I mean these were expensive cars. You needed to know your stuff. But they would actually switch it where at 8 you got certain bonuses.
Right.
And then it was 8. Well, yeah, essentially you had to get 6 almost, otherwise you were gone. And then 8. And then there were certain bonuses associated with 8. And then if you hit 12, there was another set of bonuses.
Right.
And if it happened to be a percentage, like you talked about,
Yeah.
like a percentage of them were used cars,
Yeah.
then that even gave you more. And conceivably, you could actually almost increase your pay with the same amount of sales by 50%.
Yeah.
If you hit those certain like units, you have, like,
Right, yeah.
And so we were all very conscious that as we were selling people, or as we were talking to people, or as we got closer to the end of the month, to make sure about our ratios and work together, because we were trying to make sure that we maximize that.
Right.
Because we wanted success was different levels.
Yeah.
Some people didn't care about which level they got. Some people just wanted to hit numbers.
Right.
And then others were like, no. I want to maximize what I'm going to. Now, this being sales numbers of success, it could be anything. It's like, what about overtime? Some people want to, some people want to do their job so well that they get looked at for promotion. Some people want to just do their job so well and just have nobody bother them. They just leave me alone. I just put in my 8 hours and I want to leave. That's like success. They don't want to get spoken to. Right. They don't want to get reprimanded. Yeah. I mean, so everybody has different levels of success. And we could talk about, like, the pros and cons.
Yeah, it's all success is. That's another thing that's the quote is that we've been talking about this whole time is kind of missing, is succeed. Okay, but what is success? And success to everybody is very different.
Yeah.
And a lot of people might not ever achieve true success.
Well, and also, what if they're fooling themselves?
Yeah, and then what if you, exactly. And then the other thing is, well, I did this was successful. But they don't necessarily actually feel that way. It's like a cop-out, so they don't have to keep going. And there's it's way too vague. It's just way too vague. And I think a lot of people see this, and they go, oh, yeah. No, I'm doing this because I did make a decision and I am committed. Yeah, it makes people feel good, and there's a place for that. There's nothing wrong with feeling good.
Well,
but feeling good very often creates like a level of complacency and comfortability and stuff in which you stop really trying to push.
Yeah. I just did a post with your level of effort will determine your level of happiness. Something to that effect.
Yeah.
And that was along the lines of, you if you're upset with your life or your job, anything in your personal, professional realm, chances are there's something that you can do to change it. Now, one thing that I used to always talk about when people said I had no choice, I'm like, that's bullshit. You always have a choice. You may not like your options. You may not like them. They may all be crap.
Yeah, but there's still a choice.
But you do have a choice.
Yeah.
You cannot just resign yourself to say, I don't have a choice.
Right.
And because that's just not true.
Right.
Even if the extreme, someone's got a gun to your head and they say XYZ or XYZ, whatever the option is and stuff, you could take the bullet.
Yeah.
You have a choice. Now, would you want to? Hell no. You know what I mean? It's like, no, I want to live and all that stuff. Well, but you do have a choice.
Right. Exactly. And if you're looking for opportunity, chances are there is one.
Yeah.
So
what you look for, and that gets into, of course, the soup du jour of law of attraction and so on and so forth. And
well, I'm a big believer in law of attraction. That doesn't necessarily mean that anything you want is going to be handed to you. It just means that you have to keep your eyes open to it and spot it, because it might be in weird places that you didn't expect to see it in.
Yeah, you have to have the proper focus. You basically have to be looking for it. To some degree, you need to be looking for it.
But you have to be almost zoomed out, and you have to be willing to see it in situations that you might not have originally expected it to be. Yeah. And you have to have a bigger, a big view of it,
Well, and that was kind of why, again, we'll do an episode on the whole think more, care more, live more. That it breaks down into awareness, kindness, and action, and that's the awareness part of it. That's that. Having that personal awareness and that situational awareness, because when you decide on something like to do something, great, that decision. Now how much are you truly like in The Untouchables with Sean Connery? What are you prepared to do? That's literally what it comes down to, is what are you prepared to do? Because just making a decision and saying I'm going to commit to this, that's great. That's just the first steps. You have to ask yourself, what am I prepared to do? And the question is you may not even know what you need to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why you go back into all of these things about preparation and think about, well, I'm going to have to do this, and you can break it down into manageable steps.
Yeah. Well, and just a lot of times too, it's just doing it. Just going out and doing it. Even if you fail, you learn then, okay, well, don't do that. Well, yeah. And then you just keep going.
But see,
and that's how you...
I agree with that, but I have a hesitancy to just endorse that, because I honestly think that you can look at whatever, like what you want to do, and look at someone who else has done it. And if nobody has ever done it, or you're just too lazy to actually look into it into significantly enough to find out, okay, that's fine. Then go ahead. It's better to do it than not do it, and then learn from it.
Yeah.
As long as you are in the frame of mind that you're going to learn from it.
Right.
But I always think that, no, you can look around and see who else has done something similar to this, and how can you improve upon it before you just jump in and do it, because you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
True, but sometimes you don't necessarily need that plan, though, of like, well, how do I improve upon this? That's not in my opinion, that's not that important. Just doing, because you're gonna find your own style, and the people are gonna decide if you improve upon it or not.
I guess this is actually, I'm delaying what you're gonna do. I'm saying that, okay, I need to do X, Y, Z. Oh, so and so did X, Y, Z similar or did the same thing. I'm gonna learn from them. And then, of course, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Put my take on it. Yeah. Now, at that point, it switches to what you're saying, because at that point, I'm going to do it. I've
right.
just, you know what I mean? And I may fail. So I'm just saying that I think I am more of a believer of do that prep work and do a little bit of prep time, like measure. What was it? Measure twice, cut once, as opposed to
right. And you can
it's a little bit of both. What we're talking about is a little bit of both.
And prep work is important, but you shouldn't let the prep work, in my opinion, become the model.
I got you.
Because like you're not trying to. Well, some people are, but in my opinion, you shouldn't really try to model yourself after something else.
No, and you're right. That's the downside, because you're absolutely right. Looking at it from your perspective and like a kind of as a creative, I can see where you're coming from. I can see where you're kind of going, but you run the risk, if you do it like what I mentioned, you run the risk of actually just improving upon someone else's design, when in reality you need to do it your own. You need
right. Well, and how many times have we seen the quote unquote more improved upon better product not even be what was embraced and wanted by people? So I don't even think it's about trying to be a better product or a better version of anything else. It's about giving something to people, creating a product that they connect with in their own way, right? So in a lot of times that is just lightning in a bottle. That's just spontaneous, and there's no and you're right, way that you could really prepare for that.
It's funny that when you mention that way, because that's actually how I like to be when I am in the workforce. That's actually the approach, because while I live in that duality that I talk about, where I want to make sure that things are done the way that are needed, that are tried and true. But I almost always to a T in my personal life and professional life, want to have just a twist on it so that there's something different about it. And the reason for that is because you never know what's going to come from it. You might catch lightning in a bottle.
Right.
And I'm very conscientious of when I have to abide by certain rules and stuff. That's fine. There's a time and place for that.
Yeah.
But I'm also very conscientious of every opportunity to make sure that I'm unique, or that my decision is unique, or that something's the perspective. And it can come back and bite you. Creatives, and those are artists and stuff, like you as a musician, you have more of an in tune to doing that more often than I do. Where I like it is that it's a nice in between, where I actually can straddle between those two worlds. Where I can sit there and be like, okay, this is the way it needs to be done. You gotta, button up your shirt and all that stuff.
Right.
But I can also then switch over to. It's actually why, again, like operations and management, all that stuff, because I can talk to a marketing and advertising person,
right, or
even the engineer and the management and all of them, and I can speak their language.
Yeah.
And that's not the easiest thing to do. But that's
true. It's not. It's a skill.
However, there also is a lack of something that I will never, I shouldn't say never, but most likely will never be as good as any one of them in that either.
True.
I'll be the best at what I can do, but I won't be the best at any one thing.
Well, and that's good though, because you can't, or nobody should want to be the best at Well,
you know what?
I mean,
I just read
it's okay.
I never heard it. You hear Jack of Trades, Master of None?
Yeah.
Apparently, there's a follow-up. There's another line to that, and it was. Hopefully, I can remember it. Jack of all trades, Master of none. Better to be master of one than none. I think that was it. Oh no, master of some. Better to be master of some than none.
Yeah.
Something like that. And I was like, better to be master of some than one. And I realized, I'm like, oh. whereas jack of all trades, master of none is kind of like a negative.
Mm-hmm.
But if you actually do this, the follow-up, but master of some is better than one, you actually realize that there's the flip side of that where
True.
So if I can master the art of being of some,
yeah,
that's better than if I can only do one. And
that's true.
I'm like,
well, kind of. I mean, it really depends, though.
Well,
because you could dilute.
Depends on your life. I mean,
yeah,
really.
exactly, and what you're trying to do. Because let's say
you mean the definition of success?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, I can be a master at A, B, C, D, but my passion is really doing A. But because I got so good at the other stuff, it's taking me away from that. And so
that
it's
happens.
like, yeah. So it really is kind of a subjective and a case by case sort of basis.
So again, kind of wrapping this up, we've got this innocuous phrase that was meant to be a positive, and it definitely, certainly, hopefully sparks something in someone when they say, decide, commit, succeed. But all of the things that we talked about, where there's steps that you need to take in order to actually do all of those. We kind of skipped over the parts before the decision.
Right.
Mainly because that's very personal, and that's actually what I do with the other stuff. So if you're really into that, then let me know. But for those who are listening that have all sorts of different jobs, all different backgrounds, all different sorts of careers and stuff, whatever you do, you have to have that preparation and all of the things that go into it that will make you successful, those steps, when you get to the commit part.
Right.
And then part of committing is also actually taking action and learning from that action and making it productive.
Well, commitment itself is an action too. It's an action verb.
Yeah.
There's stuff that comes with that.
Yeah,
You have to act on it. It's implied with the word itself, so that you have to do more than just, because if you're just committing to your decision, that's the same as making a decision. It's actually the same as making a decision.
Yeah, I would agree.
So you didn't actually do step 2.
And then, of course, if you don't do step 2, whatever is involved in it, you're not going to get to succeed. And success is something that you'll need to determine for yourself and be honest with yourself about, what am I really doing, as far as success? What is it going to be? Am I fooling myself? You have to have a hard question within yourself and ask those hard questions and be very self-identifying as to your strengths and weaknesses. In the business world, there was the thing that used to be called basically a SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, actions, and threats. Was it actions? Yeah. Strengths, weaknesses. Yeah, I think it was that. Maybe allies and threats. I can't remember what the A was actually now. But you need to do that kind of analysis, not only at your job, but with yourself.
Yeah.
To determine what is going to be successful. Is it going to be this big, hairy goal that you've got? Or is it going to be just something a little bit more attainable?
Right.
Because when people talk about, be realistic. Okay, there's a time and place to be realistic.
Right.
Not to kill your dreams and hopes and success. But when you do a goal, like they talk about SMART goals, like the acronym.
Yeah.
Blanking on it. Specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, well, there is an aspect of, I want to be a brain surgeon. Come on. If you want to be a brain surgeon, that's great. Lay out everything you're going to do and find out, is it actually possible that you could become a brain surgeon?
Right. Well, and the thing about something like that is you kind of know exactly what you have to do. There's tracks. You could Google it. You could know exactly what it is you have to do the entire time.
Yeah.
This is step 1. This is step 2, step 3, step 4, forever. But there are going to be some things that you don't have that sort of roadmap for.
Right. And that's when you're going to have to figure out for yourself and then really put into all of those lessons. And the biggest thing is just to learn from whatever step you're on, whether that's the pre-decision, the decision, the commitment, and the success part. Because if you don't learn from whatever success you had and celebrate the little successes, because I do definitely believe in that, you won't get to anything more. And if that is your idea of success,
or even sadder, you will get more, but you won't recognize it.
Yeah, that's true. So we're gonna leave it on that down note. And
yeah, we are.
And as always,
before that, And if you're the person who posted that quote and you're listening somehow and you're like, wait a minute, they've been roasting me for 2 straight episodes, let us know.
Yeah,
we'll send you a basket of muffins.
Yeah, I got a really great vendor for cookies.
Yeah, there we go. So,
or if better yet, feel free to hit us up. We'll have you come on. We'll have a conversation.
It's all love.
Yep. I know we're all trying to get everybody to the same spot. So, as always, think more, care more, live more, and remember, you can change your life. We can change the world one decision at a time. Good?
Good.
All right. We'll talk to you next time.